dismissed. We are feeling much better, thankfully. No after effects other than runny nose happening in our household, so we're doing much better. We appreciate all the prayers for that and all of those who reached out, obviously. There was an old man, and this is what he had to say on a sport that he quite enjoyed. He said, "Tennis is a game for young people. Until age 25, you can play singles. From there until about age 35, you should play doubles. I won't tell you my age, but when I play, there are now 28 people, and that's only on my side of the net." I thought that was pretty good. This is not a targeted sermon, although it is a sermon that does target. We're going to talk about old age a little bit, and some of you that will resonate with. That does not resonate with myself, yet I have seen a number of people in my lifetime, family, friends, loved ones, and those I did not even know, experiencing it and going through what old age is all about. 2 Chronicles chapter 16, continuing to talk on Asa, and this will be our last of our mini sermon series talking about Asa. We find him getting to be an old man and what old age brought with it for him. Some of the conclusion may not be the conclusion that you wish it would be, but it is the conclusion nonetheless that we see of Asa and his life. Let me begin here by reading verse 1, 2 Chronicles chapter 16. In the 36th year of Asa's reign, Baasha, king of Israel, came up against Judah and fortified Ramah in order to prevent anyone from going out or coming in to Asa, king of Judah. So now we have another time skip. We talked about last week how there was no more war until the 35th year of Asa's reign, and now we see another story pop up of wartime, him preparing for wartime. We have seen a jump from Asa being a young man to 10 years of peace, him being a middle-aged man, to now him getting up there in years. Now the question that you're going to ask is, how old is Asa at this time? I have no idea. All that Scripture tells us is leading up to this time, he's old. And later on in the Scriptures, it ends up telling us, I'll jump forward just a little bit, later on he gets a disease, and it mentions there that he is an old man by that time. And that's just a few years after this 36th year. So I don't know if he's in his 60s, perhaps he's in his 70s up to this time period, getting close. I don't know. We have a longer timeline of age in our modern day due to modern medicine than they did at that time, although there were many people that lived to be in their 70s during the time of Scriptures at this point. But nonetheless, I can't give you the exact age. I don't know if he's old enough to be on Medicare yet. I don't know if Blue Cross Blue Shield is covering everything for him. I have no idea. Here's what I do know about Asa at this time, though. He's seen a lot, he's experienced a lot, and he's coming off a long time of peace. This didn't mean that there weren't skirmishes and things that he had to deal with. This doesn't mean that there wasn't political turmoil at times. We've talked about that. But relatively, considering everything that's going on in the world, 25 years of peace. Do you know how many nations there have ever been and ever existed that have experienced 25 years of peace? It's few and far between. On a national level, name a time in which, even in your lifetime, America was not fighting somewhere else. It hasn't existed, right? In my lifetime, personally, has not existed, and I don't think that it will continue to exist at any point in time. So I want you to understand the situation that we're going into here with him. Now, as you recall, King Baasha is the king in the north, Israel. Remember, two different kingdoms, Judah in the south and Israel in the north. Baasha is king over Israel. And we talked briefly about this last week, but Baasha assassinated the prior king Nadab, and Nadab was Jeroboam's son, the very first king over Israel. And if you recall all of these stories of all this tumult that's happening in the northern kingdom, Baasha's son, after Baasha dies and he passes on, Elah, he also gets assassinated after 2 years of being king. So we have a time period here of peace in the south and war and assassination in the north. right? Things are so vastly different from the north and the south and the countries and the things that they are going through. So what Baasha does is he's preparing for war against the southern kingdom, but he's not only preparing for war, this is what it says, he fortifies Ramah, one of the southernmost cities, closest connected to that of Judah, and he fortifies it and prevents anyone from going out or coming in from that of Asa and the kingdom of Judah. I'm sure at this time there are a lot of people that are wanting to move to the south. They've experienced war, tough times, assassinations. Life's not good, right? Imagine a country of your own brothers and sisters just to your south, and you have the capability of moving there and experiencing good times. I'll move too. And he says, no, we've got to cut that off. We've got to stop it. And if anything, this is leading up to war taking place between the two kingdoms. So what will Asa's response be to this? Verse 2. Then Asa brought out silver and gold from the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the king's house, and sent them to Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, who lived in Damascus, saying, let there be a treaty between you and me, as between my father and your father. Behold, I have sent you silver and gold. Go, break your treaty with Baasha, king of Israel, so that he will withdraw from me. So Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa and sent the commanders of his armies against the cities of Israel, and they conquered Ijon, Dab, Abelmaim, and all the store cities of Naphtali. And it came about when Baasha heard of it, that he ceased fortifying Ramah and stopped his work. Then King Asa brought all Judah, and they carried away the stones of Ramah and its timber with which Baasha had been building. With them he fortified Geba and Mizpah. Now, this sounds like a reasonable solution to the issue. I need an ally in this, and I've got the wealth to be able to do it. Why don't I just give away some gold and some silver to the king of Aram, who actually has an alliance with the north? He knows the king of Aram. I don't know how personally he knows him, Ben-Hadad. I don't know whether or not he knew this plan would work. I presume that he had a functioning idea. Yeah, if I bribe him a little bit, he's going to break his treaty, and if anything, attack them. And that's exactly what Ben-Hadad does. According to worldly wisdom, why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you do this? According to worldly wisdom, everything that Asa did was vastly intelligent. But when we compare it to the wisdom of God and what he asks Asa to do and what he asks of all kings to do worldwide, this is not wisdom. This is in fact the opposite of what he should be doing. Let me read here verse 7. At that time, Hanani, the seer, a prophet, came to Asa, king of Judah, and said to him, because you have relied on the king of Aram and have not relied on the Lord your God, therefore the army of the king of Aram has escaped out of your hand. Were not the Ethiopians and the Lubim an immense army with very many chariots and horsemen? Yet because you relied on the Lord, he delivered them into your hand. For the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely his. You have acted foolishly in this. Indeed, from now on, you will surely have wars. Asa did the exact wrong solution to this situation. Not because getting alliances with countries, according to worldly wisdom, is unwise, but because if you remember previously, when Asa was going up against an army much more vast than his, who did he call upon to bring him a solution? It wasn't wicked kings in wicked nations around the globe. It wasn't through the breaking of peace treaties and through bribery. It was simply through God alone. This is Asa's first issue that he runs into here in his old age. He acts just like the kings in the north did. Do you know what the kings in the north did? They sought out peace treaties with people who wouldn't keep peace treaties. Can I give you an illustration here? One of the best that I possibly can, and I know this affects some people, so I like to be nice about it, but it's just reality. When you get married to somebody, you expect them to remain in that marriage no matter what situation might arise, right? I mean, that is the point of marriage. We literally make a covenant in marriage to say we are going to fight through this and to stay through it all. But marrying somebody outside of the faith who doesn't keep a covenant with the Lord our God, I don't expect them to keep their word. And here's why. Because wicked people don't. People outside of the bounds of godliness, what holds them to their word? Nothing. Nothing. Do you see how quickly Ben-Hadad turned on the nation whom he had a peace treaty with, and if anything, an alliance with, over a little bit of gold and a little bit of silver? If all it takes is a little bit of gold and a little bit of silver for me to attack the nation right next door to me, who's to say they won't turn around and attack me? What's to stop them? So, although worldly wisdom would state, yeah, a little bit of gold and silver can buy your way into a lot of things. And don't get me wrong, it can buy your way into a lot of things. It doesn't buy actual loyalty. It buys you a little bit of time, is all that it buys you. Don't, and I repeat this, and by the way, do I think that applies to nations today? Absolutely. The solution to world issues is not for you to go make treaties and to go make alliances with wicked kings and wicked people. Number one, I don't expect them to hold up their end of the bargain. What's holding them to their end of the bargain? What happens when their gold and their silver supply runs out? They're going to be asking for more and more and more and more and more. But not only that, look at what Hananiah says to him. Because you have relied on the king of Aram and have not relied on the Lord your God, therefore the army of the king of Aram has escaped out of your hand. If you had wanted Aram, I would have given it to you. If you would have called upon me to fight and to stand up against the wicked northern kings, I'd have given it to you. And if you would have stood up and said to the king of Aram, even if they would have attacked you in this time of war that's coming, even if you would have gone against them and said, no, we're going to stand by God, I would have given them to you. You defeated an Ethiopian army nearly twice your size. Who's to say that you can't take Aram and the northern kingdom of Israel? But Asa forgot to rely upon God here in this time. He had forgotten what he had done when he was a young man. Because that same man, 35 years previously, 25 years previously, when he went to war, called upon God. Don't forget with age, remembering to do the things in faithfulness that you did before. Because where you found success before in God is where you'll find success again. Where you found God to be at is where you will find him again, according to the scriptures. And Asa forgot that. Now we think, well, growing in age means growing with wisdom. Quite the opposite. Asa started relying upon himself, his gold, his silver, and wicked kings. Can I tell you what will always fail you? Relying upon you and your things. I promise it will. God would have blessed you even greater if you would have just relied upon him. Now, by the way, did this work in Asa's favor? Yeah, he got the result that he wanted. I'm not saying he didn't get the result that he wanted. I'm not saying that if you go out and make deals with wicked people that you won't go out and get what you want, because sometimes you will. But you won't get the ultimate blessing that God was actually holding for you, number one. But number two, it will be sin to do so. Folks, there are people every day of their lives who go out and by wicked means get what they want. And they end up getting what they want. That isn't proof that God blessed it. Can I repeat that? It is not proof that God blessed something because you did something by wicked means and you got it. There are 1,000 nations even now across this world that are very wicked, and right now they're conquering people. And we say, well, where's God? What's he doing in all of that? It doesn't mean God is blessing it by any regard, by any measure. This was wrong and obviously sinful of Asa to do. Don't become so arrogant to deal with life's problems by you and by worldly wisdom. You may get the result that you want, but it's not at all what God designed and what he wants. And especially, we miss out on the other blessings that God may have been able to give us through it. Asa should have said, let Israel attack. Let Aram attack. God helped me with the Ethiopians. He can do it again. 25 years of peace led Asa to make this his decision, and the very poor decision that it was. A massive army had driven Asa to God before, and now a massive army sitting before him drove him away from God. Same problem, same solution, but he just forgot where the solution actually lied. Sometimes, though, and by the way, I will say this, Israel didn't have the massive army that the Ethiopians did, nor did Aram. This, if anything, was a smaller problem for Asa to handle. Sometimes the biggest things that you'll fight in life are the big things, but don't be fooled by the small things. Don't be fooled because a problem seems less that you shouldn't deal with it the same way. Deal with it through God. Folks, as Christians, our strength does not come from men. Our strength comes from God. And an old man in Asa, who knew that at one point, forgot it. By the way, if you notice, there's a trend throughout Scripture, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but there's a trend throughout Scripture of men growing in worldly wisdom and forgetting God. This isn't the first example in Scripture of where we see a young man being faithful and in old age him turning away. Anybody remember a man by the name of Solomon? Extremely wise. You want to talk about faithful at a young age. And as he got older, let women turn away his heart to idols. Gray hair does not always mean growing with God. It can mean that, and it should mean that, by all accounts. But it's not always a guarantee. The faithfulness that we have at a young age should carry over to that at an old age. Secondly, though, Hananiah comes to explain what happens, obviously. And get this. This is exactly what Asa shouldn't be doing. Verse 10. Then Asa was angry with the seer. So Hananiah comes to him and says, you've sinned. This is not good what you've done. You've turned to wicked kings for your solution instead of relying upon God. God would have blessed you more if you would have relied upon him. Asa becomes angry with the seer and put him in prison, for he was enraged at him for this. And Asa oppressed some of the people at the same time. This isn't the same Asa that you grew up with. I mean, if you had seen Asa rise to political power, seen peacetime, if you were one of his close bystanders or somebody in the nation opening up the newspaper to read the headlines, you'd go, what in the world is he doing? This is not the Asa that we had 25 years ago. This is not the Asa that we had 35 years ago. That Asa was getting rid of idols and being courageous and standing up for God. This Asa is tossing prophets into prison. This Asa is oppressing the people. What in the world is going on? Do you know how often one sin, what we consider measly, tiny, I'll just deal with it this way. Do you know how many times that turns into another sin? Asa sinned in relying upon wicked kings, and when he gets rebuked for it, he tosses him in prison. And then he oppresses some of the people. And I presume it was the same oppression of the people who had an outcry. Asa, you can't do that. We all know that's wrong. Asa had led his people to faithfulness. Don't you think some of those people stood up and said, whoa, Asa, what in the world are you doing? And he oppressed those very same people. One sin usually carries on to others. It's not a one-time gig, one-time deal. We like to think of it as one-time gigs. Yeah, I know I messed up there, but I'll do better. Well, wait until you get rebuked for that sin. Justify that sin in your mind, and wait until you get rebuked for it. You'll be mad when somebody does. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't enjoy being rebuked for my sin. My wife spends plenty of time doing that for me. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I've got a little grit in my teeth when she's mentioning something that I did wrong. But the solution, and by the way, I don't have the power to toss my wife in prison. I'm not saying that I want to, sweetheart. But most of us don't have the power to just say, well, you know what, let me call 911 and get them over here, and you'll be tossed off for that. Most of us don't have that ability. But if we did, how many of us truly get that angry at our own sin? Yeah, sometimes we do. Rebuke is tough. And especially when you get it in your mind, I'm in charge of my life. I've done this led, Asa could have made the argument, what are you talking about? We defeated Israel. There you go, slamming my stuff. We defeated Israel. A blessing came out of this. What do you mean I'm wrong? And nonetheless, Asa was wrong, and nonetheless he got mad, and nonetheless he oppressed people. Now, I know that you know kings would never oppress anybody, right? Never. Not once in the history. That's obviously sarcasm. Kings do this quite often. How many times do kings do this when they're told that they're wrong? Most of the time. Asa started acting like all the other kings of the world, using his power for his own produce, doing whatever he wished to do, and getting angry when he's told that he is wrong. Now get this. Now the acts of Asa, from first to last, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. And in the 39th year of his reign, Asa became diseased in his feet. By the way, we won't turn there. But 1 Kings relays this story as well, that he became diseased in his feet. It specifically mentions there in the 1 Kings passage that he was in old age. Again, whatever age that is, I have no idea. This is an old man dealing with what old men deal with. Old age, health problems happen, and this might be it. But get this. His disease was severe. Yet, even in his disease, he did not seek the Lord, but the physicians. So Asa slept with his fathers, having died in the 41st year of his reign, and they buried him in his own tomb, which they had cut out for himself in the city of David, and they laid him in the resting place, which he had filled with spices of various kinds, blended by the perfumer's art, and they made a very great fire for him. One sin in the 36th year of Asa's reign led him down a path in the last few years of his reign that wasn't very good. What's the big deal, making alliances with wicked kings? Well, it eventually led him to not relying upon God for some of the big things that he had in life. He gets rebuked, won't listen, oppresses the people. He comes down with a disease. He won't call upon God to fix it. He'll rely upon his doctors to fix it. By the way, does this not sound like an old man story? It really does. Do you know what old men, and old ladies too, but especially old men, do you know what they sit around and they talk about? Their doctor's appointments. That's what they sit around and they talk about. You go to coffee at 6 o'clock at McDonald's in the morning, and there's going to be a bunch of old men sitting around, and if you listen, you will hear about the gout that they have in their feet. Those are the conversations that they have. Asa, he became an old man. But the things that he had relied upon when he was a young man, to seek out God in all things, to find his courage, he started relying upon mankind to deal with his problems. And he wasn't willing to turn to God in that. I love this passage, and I don't know if you know this one. Go ahead and flip over to Ecclesiastes. And you may be saying, why in the world are we turning over to the book of Ecclesiastes? I completely understand. Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Keep in mind here, Solomon is an old man at this time. And one of the things that he's dealing with is not only old man issues, not only older age problems, but he's dealing with life not being very much fun. And the book of Ecclesiastes is all about Solomon looking to the world to find a solution to his problems, and he hadn't found any. None of the world, nothing that he granted himself, none of the pleasures of life gave him any of the pleasure that he was actually seeking for. Verse 1 of Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, when you will say, I have no delight in them. Now, what in the world is Solomon talking about, these evil days here? Well, he's comparing youth, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, to the evil days. What are the evil days? When you get old. Because he's comparing the way that he felt when he was 25 to now how he feels when he's 65. I don't feel the same. Life isn't the same. Get this. Before the sun, the light, the moon, and the stars are darkened, and the clouds return after the rain. Life's kind of dreary. I sit inside a lot, and I watch the weather. That's what old men do, right? That's what old men do. They turn on the news at 6 o'clock in the morning, they watch the weather. Or 9 o'clock in the morning, they watch the weather. In the day that the watchmen of the house tremble. I love reading this passage, by the way. In the day that the watchmen of the house tremble. What do older folks do? They're hunched over and they tremble. They tremble. And mighty men stoop. Go look at pictures of your grandfather. At one point in time, they stood like this. Do you know how they stand now? That's what happens in old age. The grinding ones stand idle because they are few. What happens to your teeth when you get old? They fall out. And they didn't have dentures in their day, right? That's what happens. And those who look through windows grow dim. You can't see as well as you could when you were 25. And the doors on the street are shut as the sound of the grinding mill is low. If it were not for your hearing aids today, you wouldn't be able to hear a word I was saying. The grinding mill is low. And one will arise at the sound of the bird, and all the daughters of song will sing softly. One thing that I know old folks will talk about, and it's day in, it's day out. And it's fine because I'm not old yet, I understand. You rise at the littlest sounds. You can't sleep. The birds start singing, you get up. That's old age. And I'm not saying this because I'm saying, well, you who've got gray hair, you're the one dealing with this. Go talk to your friends. If you're not dealing with it, they are. If you're not dealing with it, they are. Furthermore, men are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags himself along, and the caperberry is ineffective. For man goes to his eternal home while mourners go about in the street. Old folks don't do what they did when they were young. The gumption that you had to take on the world when you were 16, when you're 66, you don't go out on the bad roads. I cannot tell you the number one thing, anytime I mention the word Chicago, if you are above the age of 60, you know what I hear? Oh, you went there? I mean, to old folks, it's a war zone. You don't go there, right? Me, I'm in the prime of life, whatever. It's different once you get to a certain age. The terror roads seem a little bit more terrorful. Terrorful, that's not even a word. The almond tree blossoms, white hair. The grasshopper drags himself along. You're not youthful anymore. The caperberry is ineffective. You've lost your drive. You've gotten old. Here's what he says, verse 6. Remember him before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl was crushed. The pitcher by the well is shattered and the wheel of the cistern is crushed. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher, all is vanity. In addition to being a wise man, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, and he pondered, searched out, and arranged many proverbs. Solomon speaking about himself here. The preacher sought to find delightful words and to write words of truth correctly. The words of wise men are like goads, and masters of these collections are like well-driven nails. They are given by one shepherd. But beyond this, my son, be warned, the writing of many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body. The conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. Solomon said, even in my old age, here's what I know. Here's the most important truth that I can give you. Obey God. Know his word. Follow the commandments. Because that applies to the young man and that applies to the old man. It applies to each and every one of us the very same. Asa knew that when he was 25, but he forgot it when he was 65. And I don't want you to go through life thinking, especially once you get to older age, retirement comes, vacation time comes, get the camper ready every year, that life is going to slow down and that the obedience to the commandments of God are any less. Because they're not. They apply just the same as when you were 35, and when you were 45, and when you were 55, as they will when you're 75, and 85, and 95. And it's easier to remember God and to do things for God when you're young. It is easier to do that than when it is when you get old and creaky and the body starts to wither away. But don't forget him in that time. And Solomon was trying to remember that. Solomon did remember his Creator in his youth, and he'd forgotten him in his old age. And he's wanting to get back to that. He's wanting to remember God and all that he had done for him. I like this quote. Compromise blinds us to who our true enemies are, and it leads us into alliances with those whom God would rather give us victory over. That's Asa. That's Asa. Sin is sometimes fools us into leading towards success. But sin never leads to success. Physically, yeah, you might get wealthy off sin. Physically, yeah, you might get what you want. Eternally, you'll get nothing that you want. The next life to come, it will not breed the results that you truly want. So what happens? He gets old, he gets a disease, and seeks out doctors instead of seeking out God. Now, for most of us, we want to live a long, happy life while we're here on the earth. And sometimes old age does bring disease and sickness and bad health that we wish wasn't there. And by the way, this is not a passage to say, well, if today you will pray for your sickness, your disease, your issue, God will remove it. No, that's not what this passage is saying. We pray that will happen, and if it's under God's will, it will happen. Asa's issue is he went to the doctor down the street, doctor, whatever his name was, instead of saying, Lord, help me with this. And by the way, that applies to us too. Please, don't go to your physical doctor for your ailments and not go to God with your physical ailments. Because it's like saying that the doctor is more powerful to cure your arthritis than God is. And most certainly not. I'll also say this about Asa. Golden years, we want to be golden. The one that can make them the most golden is God. It's God. Again, I'm not guaranteeing that your golden years will be as golden as you wish that they were. But the best way for them to be golden is through God. And Asa totally forgot that. 25 years of peace. And he thought, I got that peace. Me, I did this. And if I'll be cunning and wise, I'll really get some peace. Now, I saved this till last because I thought it was crucial to all of this. Earlier on in our scriptures, we read that Asa set aside gold and silver for the temple of God. He took not only his possessions, but the people's possessions, and set them aside for service to God. I don't know because the text doesn't tell us. But do you think that he gave to the king of Aram out of their surplus from the temple? That's very possible. Because we see a lot of kings in Scripture do that, where they took specifically things set aside for God and gave them off to not only just others, but other wicked people. Folks, we cannot be that way. Please do not take the things of God and transport them into wickedness. Please don't. I promise we will suffer severely. If you need a lesson in the Old Testament, if you go through and look at it, go look at the people that suffered judgment by the hands of God because they took the things of God and treated them as unholy. People were struck dead sometimes immediately because they took the things of God and treated them as unholy. But please, when war comes, even in old age, seek God. When disease and sickness come, even in old age, seek God. Don't turn to this world for your solutions. They have some, but if it's not based upon godliness, it's worthless. It's worthless. This is why, by the way, I think nationally still it totally applies. This is why today I don't want America seeking out allies in wicked countries. It doesn't work. Physically, for a moment, it works. Largely across the board, it just leads to problems. It just leads to problems. But that also applies to your life. I don't want you to seek out wicked alliances in your life to get your way and to get what you want. And yeah, sometimes it will stave off war. Sometimes if I say, well, I get this buddy who's got some wealth to be able to get me through this, we'll be able to do it. This is why and again, this is not a blanket statement, but this is why I don't think it's always the best guess, number one, to say, man, I'm really in debt. I better go take out a loan to take care of this. Oh, you're asking for it. Because we're seeking out not God, but the world. And that's exactly what Asa did. It's exactly what Asa did. He had the opportunity for peace, but instead his pride got him more war. You remember what Hananiah said? Now because of this, till the day you die, you'll have war. And by the way, that's exactly what happened. He would have actually taken King Baasha, fought him, and won the war, and it would have been done and over with. But instead, you know what 1 Kings tells us? For the rest of this time, they had war. He got more war by seeking peace through worldly means. He got exactly what he didn't want because he sought his own devices. Don't at the end of your race, when you get to old age, quit and say, well, life's good now, I've got it made. It's not made until we're done breathing. That's when it's made. The day that we can say, my service here on the earth is done towards Christ, is the day that I cannot breathe anymore. That is that day. And it is very easy to forget that as life hits you with times of war and times of peace. It's easy to forget God in all of the craziness that life can bring. And sometimes those are good things, sometimes they're not so good things. Now, I don't know if you know this, but our churches across the nation are mostly filled with gray hair. And that is a beautiful, wonderful thing. Can we just set aside a moment to say, all of you above the age of, and I will let you insert the age of whatever you think old age is. I'm not going to call anybody old. But continue to be faithful and continue to strive to teach younger people to be faithful. Because that's also what comes with old age. That's also what comes with it. And don't think that the time is up and we can sit back and relax and life will be good from now on. You may get war for the last 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And who wants that? That's what we will get when we don't seek out God. Life can make you forget the truth. Please don't. John chapter 15. Then I'm going to shut up. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it, that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself, unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you, unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him, he bears much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up, and they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it shall be done for you. By this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. How do we stay on the vine that is Christ? We abide in him. We do what he wishes us to do, not what I wish me to do. I'm not seeking my own, my pleasure, my satisfaction. I want to seek out the satisfaction of Christ. I want to seek out what leads to salvation in the next life for myself and everyone else around me. Because where does my power come from? Not me and my decisions. Christ and what he has done. And in fact, this applies to the young, to the middle-aged, and to the old. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it, that it may bear more fruit. Who has control over the vine? Not me. Thank the Lord. Christ does. And those who abide in him remain on the vine. We're expected to bear fruit. And the only way that we bear fruit is through him. All the power, every ounce of it, young, middle-aged, old, comes from Christ. Every ounce of it. It's not from me and the words that I bring to you. It's not even from this word. It is from Christ. This word just tells us about it. Folks, don't we serve a wonderful God who cares about the young and the middle-aged and the old? He really does. He wants everyone of any age, anywhere, to come and be part of the vine, to be a branch on the vine that is Christ. That is the God that we serve. God knows who are his, and he serves and gives them victory. That's the kind of God that we serve. That's exactly what Christ died on the cross, so that you and I could achieve victory, not in this world, but in the next. That is true. You and I today, that is the God that we serve. The God that has given us victory over death. The God that has given us victory over death. And Asa forgot that. Don't forget that in your old age. When the grays are, when the hair is either gone or it's way more gray than you wish it was. Remember Christ in that time. As we stand and sing our hymn invitation today, know that Christ has done everything on our behalf, and our power only comes through him as Lord. We have one Lord, just one, and he gives us victory. Not me and my alliances and my physicians, not anything else in life. It's Christ, and we need to rely upon him in all that we do. Won't you stand and sing your hymn invitation?